I invite you to be seated. I want to thank you for your welcome of me. I want to thank those who organized this United Methodist Episcopal Day. Jessica and Lynn have been at the forefront of all that. And welcome those who have come to that gathering and joined us here in this worship space. I want to thank Dean Vieira for his welcome and for our friendship and the life that we share together in Christ. And I'm excited about being here. This is my third time here to preach at chapel. And I need to say, and I join with all of you saying, it's always great to do music with Mark.
All right.
I serve as the bishop of the Episcopal Church of the Diocese of Newark, which is the northern 7 counties of New Jersey, the upper third of the state, plus Summit in Union County. And over 100 years, that's been a bone of contention because the Diocese of New Jersey wants Summit, and we want to keep Summit. But there you are. And I've had a lot of conversations, relationship, and building work with Bishop John Scholl, who is the United Methodist Bishop, and have also had gone good relationship with Bishop Devidar, his predecessor. And then Tanya and I have done work together in the city of Newark, trying to bring peace to much of the troubled areas of that city. So lots of connections here, and I'm grateful to be here among you. May the words of my mouth and meditation of all our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Before coming bishop, I was a priest in this diocese a long time ago, and in 1983, I became the ecumenical officer. I was Lynn Weber's predecessor by several people. And as ecumenical officer, I went annually to the National Workshop on Christian Unity. And Rick Townley, who is the ecumenical officer for the Diocese of New Jersey, has been going to those gatherings since the Truman administration, I think. He and I were part of those dialogues, and Rick continues to be a part of that. And one of the major engagements of that national meeting, bringing ecumenical leaders from all over the country, was the annual Episcopal Lutheran Eucharist. And there was Led 1, Led 2, and Led 3, Lutheran Episcopal Dialogue. And I can't remember which one of those numbers we were on. But there was some excitement that we were worshiping together and sharing communion, which the interim provision allowed for. And I can't remember if the preacher was Lutheran in Episcopal Church, or the Lutheran was a celebrant in the Episcopal Church and the preacher was Episcopal. I can't remember all of that, but some people were very excited. I did not think this was that big a deal. I was 32 years old, but some people who had been at this for a long time thought this was a monumental achievement. And I remember a sermon preached by the head of the ecumenical officers of the Episcopal Church. His name was Warren Cruz. And he said, who do the Lutherans lionize? What is in their DNA? He said, if you look back, they lionize their theologians. Their theologians getting the theology right, writing it carefully and rationally and coherently. And then he said, who do the Anglicans lionize? The Anglicans lionize their poets and their artists. Those are the ones who are buried at Westminster Abbey. And I thought of that distinction, and I carry it forward some 30 years later, because I still see that in play. And as we have moved out of our silos of the Episcopal Church and the Lutheran Church, and the chrysalis of that silos finally broke open in 2000, when we had called the common mission, which meant that we could have full communion one with another and exchange pastors and priests, and all of that, I realized that the DNA of the Lutherans and the DNA of the Episcopalians have joined together to make something much more powerful and abiding. That's a great thing. And it moves at a glacial pace. Quite frankly, I didn't have the patience for moving at that glacial pace, but I'm glad that people spent the time to do the theological work and the liturgical work, ecclesiastical work, to keep moving things forward. Now, if we take it to today, and what we're about today, Methodist Episcopal dialogue, how do we compare them? Now, I need to say that there are some Anglicans who would say there is no comparison because the Methodists are Episcopalians or Anglicans, they just don't know it. Because John Charles Wesley died as Anglican priests and they really never left. We let them go. If you haven't learned this, Episcopalians don't kick people out, but they make it difficult for people to stay. Part of our history. If you look at our DNA in the Episcopal Church, and you take art and poetry and all of beauty to an extreme, you get fussiness. You get fussiness. In the 36 years that I've been ordained, I've seen a lot of Episcopal fussiness. Those of you who are Methodists, I know you have seen it as well. How do we hold our hands in the Orient position? Where do we put the bursen veil? Do we bow? When do we bow? Do we genuflect? When do we genuflect? How do we cross ourselves? Are you lost yet? That is fussiness. That is the Anglican world that John and Charles Wesley found when they went to Oxford as seminarians. It was a fussy church. And they didn't have any part of it or didn't want to be completely defined by it. So they developed some passion and they developed a practice which caused the other members of the church community at Oxford to derisively call them Methodists because of their method. And you can imagine the conversation where the Oxford Anglican dons got together in a room, sipping their sherry, and saying, "We don't do that here." And so the brothers left as priests, came across the ocean, and got on horseback. Got on horseback and began to preach and set up preaching stations and churches. I think I remember reading that John Wesley preached somewhere in the order of 500 sermons in 6 months. Incredible outpouring of evangelical spirit. So that would seem to me, I want to test this with those of you who are Methodists, that the DNA of Methodists is to go out and to carry the story. If you take that to an extreme, the shadow side is you keep going and you're not rooted anywhere. I want to test that too. I want to test that. I don't know if that's the case, but it's plausible that it could be. It could be. So now we are here, Episcopalians and Methodists, and we're moving toward this common understanding, common practice. And I rejoice in it for several reasons. One, I think it's time that we do it. Two, it adds to the diversity of who we are as the Christian family, and I call upon the wisdom of Aquinas who said diversity is the perfection of the universe. But most importantly, it seems to me that this gathering together, this joining together of Methodists and Episcopalians, and as they bring together their DNA, it has a corrective to their shadow side. Episcopalians being too fussy, Methodists being maybe unrooted. And so the combination of all that begins to move down the fussiness, the extremism that each tradition has in it. And I rejoice that. I rejoice that, and it becomes necessary, it seems to me. It becomes necessary and needed in the world's landscape. And I want to divert just a moment to talk about a book that I read this summer, and I think many other people have read it too. It's now #2 in the New York Times bestseller list, Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, an editor at The Atlantic, an African-American brilliant writer who writes a letter to his 15-year-old son and warns him about the world that his son is growing up in. And Coates takes aim at what he calls the American dream with a small d. And the American dream has been designed from the get-go to protect and give privilege and opportunity to people like me, white men. white women too, but most especially white men, at the expense of others, particularly those who are black. This has been from the beginning. He warns his son. The tradition in America has been to destroy the black body. It is heritage. As Jesus' followers would say, this is a hard saying. Who can believe it? And I need to tell you, there are a lot of people who don't want to believe it, or will refute it, or who will take refuge and reseal the silos that they have come from. I think what Coates talks about is true, it is accurate, it is the landscape that we find ourselves in. And Ferguson, Baltimore, and Charleston have just revealed that landscape even more dramatically to all of us. So that is the landscape. Now what Coates also says, and he's very honest about this, he says he looks back on the faces of those involved in the civil rights movement, people who faced enormous torment, and he sees on their faces they're looking at something beyond themselves, to a God that gave them hope and strength, mercy, power, and blessing. And Coates says, quite honestly, he doesn't see it, he can't access it, he doesn't believe in it. He's very honest about that. There are millions of people like him in this country, around the world, who cannot see the abiding presence and the mercy and the blessing of God. That's one of the reasons that we're here. Because we are believers in the biblical dream with a capital D. A dream born by the prophets, incarnated in Jesus Christ. Preached and prayed by Martin Luther King. And he was cut down because someone couldn't abide his version of the dream, which challenged his truncated version of the small d dream. So many have been cut down since. We are bearers. We are bearers of that dream. We are bearers of that dream. It is our responsibility to follow the command of the gospel that we heard this morning, to be sent out into the world and offer this hope which so many people say they don't have access to. We need to tell them about that hope. We need to demonstrate that hope. We need to live into that hope. Because coupled with all of this is our tendency, when things get difficult, and things are difficult now, we revert to our silos. We go back to our fussiness, or we go back to our rootlessness, or we look at our silos and we worry about what carpet we should have on the floor, what should we hang on the walls, and we spend all our time worrying about that, and the world is going to hell. We can't do that. Couple that with the fact, oh sweet Jesus, we have 14 more months of this, of the presidential election campaign. I didn't watch the debate last night. I saw the first one. But what most, if not all, of these candidates are preaching, they say, and I'm saying, you heard the word preach, they say, we need to talk about the center of American culture. They're not talking about the center, they're talking about a silo. Their silo. Come into my silo. I will protect you. I have the answers. I know how to make this work. If there's collateral damage, other people don't make it inside, well, it can't be helped. They do it because it works. The fear level in this country and around the world is so deep that people can tap into it because it is very close to the surface. It works, but it is not gospel. Amen. And so if we spend our time worrying about what's inside of our silos, we are dead in the water. And as far as Jesus is concerned, we should be dead in the water. Jesus sends us out. And if we can go out together, You always send them out 2 by 2. Well, I see this ongoing dialogue and movement between Episcopalians and Methodists. We go out 2 by 2. Episcopalians and Methodists, that's how we go out. Drawing on the strength of each tradition, honoring one another. Each side sort of cuts down on the shadow side of who we each are. And we live into this dream which has been given to us, which is made manifest for us in Jesus Christ, which we receive in the body and blood of the Eucharist. That is how we are empowered. That is the hope that we carry. The world needs it. May it be so.
Amen. Amen.